So in the workshop today we have a customer's KTM 85 2013. It come to me with the kickstart jammed and the bottom end seized. We have the engine over here on the bench. We're going to do a full complete engine rebuild. We'll go all the way through it. So far I've already had part of the engine apart. Just to take a look at what's going on. I'll just place you there just so you can see. Take the head off. So we've got the barrel off already. Pop the barrel down there. Obviously we've got the piston. What we found is that the crank will turn over when it goes so far. It gets to there and it's completely jammed solid. What's happened, you can get it to go past and then it will rotate round, and again once it gets to there you can hear it knocking. That's where it gets solid. Now the con rod itself in here is very stiff, should be free, but it's sort of stiff. Also, if we look inside the engine itself, we have some wear lines down in here. So you've got wear here on this side of the crank and where the bearings have seized. There's also a few marks on the inside here. So we're going to strip this engine apart and we're going to replace. We've got a new crank to go in, new crank bearings both sides. We've already done a clutch on the bike and the clutch was replaced about 3 hours ago. We're going to go all the way through it. We're going to strip this engine. We're going to, like I say, we're going to replace the crank bearings. We're going to do all new seals. We're going to take a look at the clutch, make sure all that's okay, and then we'll have it back together. So I will now take off the flywheel. I've got a flywheel puller here, which you can get on Amazon. It's about £18. Pulls the flywheel off nice. So I'll crack on and get that done now, and I'll come back in a minute. So I've just pulled off the part of the flywheel or stator plate there behind. Now there is a timing marks on this that you can time up, but I know the timing on this bike was perfectly fine. So what I've done is I've done marks at the bottom, at the sides and up again at the top, so that when we rebuild this bike everything goes back in line. I'm just about to take off this stator plate now. Okay, so the stator plate is now removed. Here you have a Woodruff key here, which we need to get out because we're going to need that for our new, to go on our new crank. I've also started to undo the reed block here. I'll have some bolts back in. We'll take the reed block off, set that to one side, just over the back there. I'll also pull out the reeds, taking notice to which way they go round. They are V-Force 3 reeds, carbon fibre reeds. So we will place them over the back, keep them clean. What I've also done is I like to get a piece of paper, and as the bolts come out I like to place the bolts as to where they've come from, just so we have an idea of where the bolts live, and when we come to doing the rebuild we put the bolts back in exactly where they've come from. Okay, so looking down on this side, what I've done is got your V-Force at the top, and I've started to draw out a bit of the engine. This here corresponds to the engine itself. So if I turn that around, this hole here is basically this here. So what I will do is I will locate the bolts as to where they come from. This here is obviously your gear selector, which is still attached here. So I'll put all those bolts in the line as to where they come out. So when they go back in the same place. Okay, so as you can see I've removed all of those bolts all the way around there, and I've drew a slight diagram on this bit of cardboard here, just so that we know that everything from this side comes in place. And I will put on there S for stator. So that's the stator side. Okay, then we will flip it over and take off the other side. So now that is all done and taken care of, I've placed this rag on top of the workbench there just in case any oil was to come out. But we're going to take off the clutch cover here, and we're going to take off the gear selector. Again, we're going to be putting that into a piece of cardboard so we know exactly what bolts come out of where, and I'll come back when that's done. With all that removed out of the way, I'm about to undo these here to remove the clutch pressure plate itself, and then we'll work our way around the outside. Now with them done, what you will find once you take that plate off is you will find this push rod which slips inside of there. There's also a ball bearing underneath and a lever rod that goes the other side, which I've already taken out. You now need to undo this bolt here, take that off, which will then should give us access to remove the clutch basket. With that removed, yeah, the inner part underneath here, between here and the other bit, you will find there's a washer. You mustn't lose this washer, because if you don't put that back in, your clutch will not work correctly. This here should just then slide out. With that slid out, you're now ready to undo the bolts on the outer side of the casing. Again, we will draw it like we did before on a piece of cardboard. Make sure they're located in the right order and sequence, they go back together the right way. Once you've taken that cover off, you're then going to need to undo this circlip here. Take off this spigot ring, this shaft at the end of there. You also need to disconnect the kickstart, and then on here you have a bolt which goes through onto the crank. You need to make sure you take that off too, and then your gear selector and everything else should be able to stay in there. Okay, so once you remove the gears, you need to make sure you don't lose any of the washers or the circlip there, and then to get your input shaft out, or your gear selector shift out, you need to slide this one back on the spring and slide it over, and then you should be able to just pull it straight out like this. Okay, and then you just need to set that aside somewhere nice and safe, so that's not going to go anywhere. So that's all okay. Alright, once you've done that, the rest of it then should be pretty much straightforward. We should be able to undo this bolt here, take that off the end of the shaft, and be able to split that casing apart. Okay, with all that off there now, so we've taken out the shaft selector and everything else, all that now, the casing, as you can see. You shouldn't really do this, but I'm going to do it. There is a little gap in between the casing, and the casing will start to come apart. Should be a little gap all the way around. You then need a crankshaft puller, or pusher should I say, and you bolt it on, and then you should be able to split the crank open. Okay, so now with a slight bit of persuasion, managed to split the two cranks in half. So you have the first crank there and your second crank here. Obviously you can see where this has got really hot here, which is where it's obviously seized and jamming, which we'll take that out. First of all, we need to take out all the gears here, make sure that we get our gears out in the right alignment, and once those gears are out, we can then look at rebuilding the engine. There are springs on the end of here, locating springs. We need to make sure that we do not lose them, so when we put it back together, it bites up nice and tight. Okay, so now with the two halves apart and all of our stuff set on the bench there nice and neatly, and know where everything goes, we can now start to inspect the casings themselves. I have noticed that on this casing here, something's actually picked up inside. You can see that it's been dragging around on the inside of the bearing case in there, which obviously caused it to seize up. And the same again on this side. As you can see, there's a bit of metal there. Okay, screwdriver and see, you can actually see there's a shard of metal there. So we're going to have to clean this up. We might have to file this back down, as there's quite a lot of damage in there which something's picked up. We don't want that catching on the new crank. Okay, so now we've got the casings out. We've had these in the freezer for like 4 or 5 hours, make them nice and cool, and I'm just going to knock them into this end. Okay, so I've just knocked new seals into the end of the bearing there, and also we've got a new bearing in that side. They both fit nice and flush. And I've reworked the inside of this where the inside there where the crank's going to spin round. Hey guys, so one thing I did want to bring to your attention, obviously I've got a new hot rods crank kit. If you buy these kit, it doesn't come with the bearings, so you've got all of the bearings separately. But when you get your new main bearings that go in here, basically this is the old bearing, and it comes with this collar here, right? And this collar actually sits inside. Okay. Now what that is for, so when you're knocking them in, you don't actually knock out the roller bearings, because obviously if you imagine if you were knocking in or pressing in your bearing this way round, there's a chance you could knock these out. So this here just literally keeps them in line, and obviously use it for knocking them in. Once you've knocked them in, you can then take that piece out and you're good to fit your crank back in. One thing I do advise, guys, is getting a little bit of light gear oil and rubbing it around the inside of the crank there on both sides, and just a little bit inside that bearing. I know they are pretty much dry bearings, but just any little bit of oil will help with it all going back together. I'm not telling you a lot, I'm just saying a little bit on your finger and just smear it around the outside edge. Just ready for the rebuild. Okay, so with the rebuild side, it's just a case of placing it back exactly how you take it off, sliding it back in. You will have to knock this using the top of here. I do use a snap-on lead weight. It's got lead shots in it. It's a lead weight hammer. It doesn't mark the thread, and you'll be able to tap it back in. If not, if you've got a press, you can put a press over the top and press it back in. But rebuild is just the same way as you take it off. I hope this video helps you guys, and see you in the next one.